Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order. Second item on the agenda is hearing of residents. We don't have anybody signed up. If there's anybody in the audience that does wish to come and speak, please come up to the podium, say your name and address, and tell us what it is you have to say. All right. Don't see anybody coming up. All right. Next item on our agenda then will be the consent agenda, the minutes for the August 8, 2018 regular meeting. Commissioners, do we have anything we need to change on the minutes? All right, and a motion for the minutes then?
I move that we approve the consent agenda minutes of the August 8th, 2018 regular meeting as presented.
All right, motion by Commissioner Brode. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second by Commissioner Ray. All right, call for a vote.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion carries 6-0. Next item on the agenda, public hearings. Item 4A, case number ZC 2018-003. Hold a public hearing, consider and make a recommendation to City Council on a request. City Council on a request to rezone approximately 5 acres of land from single-family residential, agricultural district RA, and general business GB to neighborhood services NS, located northwest of the intersection of FM 1518 and West Schaefer Road. And just as a note here, the applicant has withdrawn this request, so there's nothing to discuss, nothing to cover on this tonight. And if the applicant wishes to proceed, they will have to begin the application process from the beginning again. So next item on the agenda then, public hearing, item 4B, SUP 2017-001. Hold a public hearing, consider and make a recommendation on a request for a specific use permit to allow a convenience store with gas pumps on an approximate 2-acre site. The property is more specifically described as the southeast corner of the intersection of FM 1518 and Maskey Road, City of Schertz, Guadalupe County, Texas. Emily.
Good evening, Commissioners. So just to get your bearings on where this project is, this is Maskey Road, and this is FM 1518. So to the north of the subject property, which you can see in green, we have the Maskey Road. To the east and to the south, it's undeveloped general business zone property, and then to the west is FM 1518. They're requesting a specific use permit with an associated conceptual site plan to allow a convenience store with gas pumps. The proposed development includes a 4,500 square foot convenience store, 5 gas pumps, and a 1,075 square foot car wash. On August 9th, 5 mailers were sent out to the property owners within the red buffer area. At this time, we've received no responses in favor or opposed. The comprehensive land use plan identifies this area as single-family residential, which you can see on this map by the red star. This portion of Central Schertz was adopted in 2002, which was prior to the most recent ACUS study update. Since this was not updated, we don't really feel that single-family residential is exactly the most appropriate, seeing as how this portion of the property is within APZ2, which you can see here. So this is the APZ1 line, and APZ2 is here. So that's the accident potential zone from Randolph per the ACUS study. Additionally, since the Schertz sector plan didn't focus or address this portion of Central Schertz, that's why it's still single-family residential. Due to all the adjacent properties being designated for commercial use and zone general business, the proposed convenience store with gas pumps would be a compatible land use. So this is the overall site plan, which on the screen is very difficult to see, so we're going to zoom it in a little so we can really talk about it. So they're proposing a 4,500 square foot convenience store, which you can see here, 5 gas pumps adjacent to 1518, a 1,075 square foot car wash. They are doing a masonry dumpster enclosure that meets our requirements. They have multiple areas for parking identified in yellow for a total of 24 parking spaces. They are proposing an access onto 1518 and onto Maskey Road. They're also providing a cross-lot access to potential adjacent property. They are also providing a fire lane, which is identified by this dashed line here, that does meet the City of Schertz requirements. This next sheet that I want to show y'all is the landscape plan. So they are proposing 26 trees along 1518 and Maskey Road, which does comply with the required ratios for the two roadway classifications. In total, they're proposing 5 Mexican sycamores, 7 bur oaks, 17 shoe-marked oaks, 6 live oaks, and 9 cedar elms for a total of 44 trees on this site. They are also proposing shrub screening along all property lines, which you can see kind of identified by this symbol here. All the landscaping will be watered by an automatic irrigation system, and the proposed landscaping does meet the requirements of the UDC. Next thing is the convenience store itself elevations. They are proposing a brick and stucco finish. With this being on a corner, there's double frontage, so they are required to do glazing on both this elevation, which faces 1518, and this elevation, which faces Maskey. Their current proposal does meet the building material, glazing, and both vertical and horizontal articulation requirements. This is the proposed car wash, which is proposed to be a brick finish. This is the proposed gas canopy, which is proposed to be a brick and stucco finish. So as I had mentioned earlier, this property is within the APZ2. Since it is within that, our UDC requires that acknowledgement from Randolph Air Force Base be received in order to proceed with a zoning-related application. So this is the actual information that we received from Randolph for this project. So it indicates that per the land use compatibility guidelines, convenience stores with fuel pumps shall have a maximum floor area ratio of 0.22. And then it indicates community planning is of the opinion that approving this request with conditions limiting the floor area ratio to 0.22 for the convenience store will not adversely impact operations and delivery of mission requirements at JBSA Randolph. Per staff's calculations of the proposed conceptual site plan that y'all are reviewing tonight, it is under that specified 0.22 floor area ratio. So per our conversation earlier this morning with the chairman, he wanted to see if this property was within the floodway or floodplain. So I did pull the ferment map from FEMA this morning. So this is the subject property, and you can see all the floodway and floodplain on the other side of Maskey, but they're identifying that this property is not in that area. The staff is making a recommendation of approval of the SUP to allow a convenience store with gas pumps conditioned upon the following occurring. No additional development will be allowed on this property that would cause the floor area ratio to exceed the JBSA Randolph specified 0.22. A building permit is approved within 1 year of the adoption of the SUP ordinance, and the use begins operation within 2 years of the issuance of the necessary building permits. So just as a reminder, those last two conditions are standard on every SUP that we bring forward, and that first one is really due to it being within the APZ2 area. And we do have multiple representatives of the project here if you have any questions for them.
All right, and this is a public hearing, so we'll open the public hearing at 6:09. If anybody has any comments on this, please make your way to the podium. And seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing at 6:10. Commissioners, comments, questions?
I have one question on calculating the percentage, keeping it under 0.22. Obviously, you use the 4,500 square feet for the.
So, I will show my ignorance a little bit. I had to Google how to do this because it's not something that I typically have to do. But in doing this, you use the convenience store portion, the car wash, and the area that is the gas canopy. And that calculation against the area of the lot gives you that ratio. And when I did it, it was 0.11.
Thank you.
Can you put up the comments that Randolph, the conditions that Randolph had?
So you're probably going to ask about the storage facility, right?
No, I can't read it all. Oh, I can read that one. Our screen has a lot of it, well, my screen has a lot of it cut off. Never mind, I can read it here. I'll continue with it. I've gone over our lighting restrictions on this. I'll just go and predict that I think in the future, if Randolph gets the new plane they're talking about, they're going to start doing a significant amount of night flying. I think our canopy lights and parking lights are okay. I have a little concern about what type of I guess signage for the store. Some of these video lights we see on 3009 with the bright videos and the changing blinking lights and stuff. Do we have a way of controlling that or putting restrictions on that in the future?
So from my understanding, they'll have to meet our lighting and glare standards within the UDC, and they'll have to meet, to get any type of building permit for the signs, they'll have to meet our sign regulations.
Yeah, this is on the, depending on which way they're flying, this could be on the final approach for one of their runways. And having a blinking light, the blinking video billboards, I think could pose a significant issue if and when that ever happens. So I'm not sure if there's anything we can do about it tonight, but maybe ask the developers to have that kind of in the back of their mind that it may be an issue in the future.
So Mr. Bro, in regards to electronic signage, we do have specific requirements, and there are nighttime requirements. So, for example, one of them is going to be that electronic illuminated signs cannot exceed 1 candle foot of illumination at the property line at night, or after. I believe it's listed as after sunset, and I can email you those specific requirements. They are in Article 11 with signage under the electronic sign portion. I apologize, I didn't bring my UDC and my Surface is out of batteries. But I know offhand that is one. You can't have white illuminated backgrounds after sunset either, because that's one of the brightest ones. And I believe that the rotation of the message cannot occur more frequently than every 4 seconds. So we do have requirements if they so just choose to do a electronic sign like that. I will tell you that most of the convenience stores and gas stations that we see don't do that. They have the price per gallon that's electronic, but most of them aren't doing any kind of rotating message. The ones that we typically see on those are churches, banks, the city has one, kind of more of those kinds of facilities. So.
Thank you. And did I see on here a retention or detention pond on the property?
So it is in this area right here.
It'll be retention, detention. What's it going to be?
Detention.
I'm just wondering where does the drainage go after that?
Well, it goes where it goes naturally, or where it goes existing into 1518.
Is it underground or above ground?
What's that? It goes above ground into the. You have a bar ditch here.
On 1518?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's detention. I mean, with the zoning case, we had to go through the complete site plan approval process because the code said. So we went through and we met all the conditions of site plan approval. We met the code, and then we also have to still go through the building permit process. So
okay, thanks.
We'll meet the ordinance. Thank you.
Was this a site for a paintball range earlier? Were you here then? Maybe Bryce was.
I'm not aware of it.
Some years ago, was this going to be a paintball facility on this corner?
I don't know that I have ever heard that.
I think it was.
It may have been before my time.
There was at one point a proposal for a paintball facility around the soccer fields. I'm not sure if it was this exact piece of property, but there was something that kind of came forward and died fairly quickly.
This is much better.
Hi, young lady, I have a question for you while you got that map up.
Yes, sir.
To me, the black represents the asphalt, concrete, whatever we want to call it. That's the impervious cover. And all that gray outside of that represents where the landscaping is going to be.
Correct.
What is on the ground out there besides the trees that are being put in and the shrubs? Is that grass? Is that mulch? Is it rock? I can't find that answer in here. And it's probably here, but I could not find it.
I'm going to double check really quick. I think I know the answer, but I don't want to tell you wrong. So it is being proposed as Bermuda grass.
Okay.
All of this kind of speckled
Dash stuff.
area.
Yeah.
Yes.
You'd agree.
Couple of follow-on questions. Following with Commissioner Broad, can I assume, or can we safely assume that Randolph had no issues or didn't bring up the lighting, or?
So in the when we get a new application in, we send in every new application to Randolph for their consideration. And typically, if they have a concern, regardless if they have a concern or they don't have a concern, they send back comments. With this project, they did not specifically state any comments on lighting or glare, and then with the acknowledgement and kind of acceptance of the convenience store portion, they didn't provide any information on it either.
Okay. Then question number 2, the SUP and the resulting calculations of density are based on the 1.9 or the 2-acre site, and not the larger site that includes the detention pond?
Correct.
When Randolph made the comment about no future development, are we talking development just within because the overall lot is much larger than the lot we're talking about development in. So you have the lot that we're talking about doing the development in, and then you have the remainder of that lot, which is also where the drainage detention is at.
So when they sent this in, they did provide what they had reviewed, which was the entire property. They reviewed this whole site, and they cannot exceed 0.22 floor area ratio of convenience store associated items on the whole property.
All right, and you said you calculated what's currently being proposed at 1.1.
0.11. Half of what Randolph would allow is what they're currently proposing.
So they still have the other half to put on the remainder of that big lot.
So if they wanted to do that, they would have to come back through this process and get an SUP approved potentially again if they wanted to expand the convenience store portion.
No, I'll put storage buildings there.
So if it's something allowed within the UDC, the land use, per the zoning, we don't have to send it to Randolph if it's not a zoning-related application to get their acknowledgement. However, I will tell you that in the original application that they sent to Randolph, they had discussed doing a mini storage warehouse, and Randolph did comment that they would only allow a certain floor area ratio of that as well, for what it's worth.
If I may, Commissioner Evans, you're kind of you're getting to the point or the question I was really trying to ask, Emily, is that .22 limitation, is it applicable just to the 2 acres where they're building the convenience store with gas pumps, or is it applicable to the entire outline of that lot? The larger lot size.
So I would assume, since they reviewed the whole project as a whole, because the detention area is part of this project, it's for the entire thing. But if they want to do any kind of expansion that's related to a convenience store, they'd have to come back through the SUP process.
Okay, but I think the point Commissioner Evans was trying to get to is what if the property owner decides he wants to do something else that's not strictly related to the convenience store, like put a small office building back there, or build storage, or whatever another use in general business might be. So where I'm trying to get to is how much is he going to be allowed to build on that entire piece? Is it .22?
If it's a land use that is allowed within general business zoning district, then they would be allowed to do 80% impervious coverage of the property. So the 0.22 is related specifically to the convenience store aspect per Randolph's communication.
So as the commission remembers, one of the big items that we have is that while Randolph reviews the application and makes comments, we have no ability in our ordinances that have been passed to enforce the will of Randolph. Okay? With one caveat, and that caveat is in zoning functions, because we have a requirement in our zoning that in order for city council to take action on this item, that Randolph has to provide a consent to, basically, which they have provided on this. Specifically, the recommendation of staff and the condition of this application of the .22 floor area ratio will only apply to the applicable land area that the SUP applies to, which is that section. So if they came in and instead of wanting to build a convenience store said, I want to build a restaurant, or I want to put a Sam's Club right here, they would be allowed to do that by right, regardless of floor area ratio. So what we're requesting, what is included in this as a condition, is limiting the floor area ratio only on this piece of property. And if they choose, as Emily said, to come in with a large expansion, a major renovation, or something else that requires a zoning change or SUP for this property or an adjacent property or another property that the owner may own inside of the APZ area,
Okay.
we'll have this conversation again. Randolph will re-weigh in again on whatever that
Okay. I just want to understand what we're approving, or
Nope,
what
absolutely.
we're considering. That's all, Bryce. Thank
Yes.
you. That's the answer I was looking for.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so a question that I have on this is we look at the site for the convenience store, and if you look at it as a separate piece from the larger lot, that in essence that is offsite detention. So my question is that detention pond been designed to accommodate only the detention requirements generated by the convenience store, or is that detention pond calculated to handle the runoff from that entire lot?
Exact answer for your question. I'm trying to remember, my project manager designed the detention pond. It definitely handles the convenience store, but I want to say it's going to have to get a little, it looks big enough to handle the whole thing. From here, I can't really see the depth of it. So at the time, what will happen is right now, what's being considered is just that corner lot.
Mm-hmm.
So the rest of it is, we have to come back through a rezone on that piece. So what I can tell you for sure, I believe it is oversized to accommodate you know, the 80%, but I just, without seeing the contours and the depth of the pond, I can't be sure. So the only thing I can tell you is that it is sized for the convenience store.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we recommend approval of special use permit 2017-001 to City Council with the conditions as stipulated by staff.
All right, have a motion to make a recommendation for approval by Mr. Outlaw. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, second by Commissioner Bro. Any other comments or questions, Commissioners?
One question. The property immediately across Maskey Road to the north, is that county or is it Universal City?
I believe it's universal.
It is Universal City.
All right, any other questions? All right, we'll call for a vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Nay.
Aye. Motion carries 5 ayes, 1 nay. All right, next item, number 5 on the agenda, 5A, PC 2018-033, items for individual consideration. Consider and act upon a request for approval of a preliminary plat for the Fire Station Number 3 subdivision, an approximately 5.02 acre tract of land located approximately 900 feet west of the intersection of FM 1518 and Lower Seguin Road, City of Schertz, Bexar County. Oh, I'm sorry, my apologies. I skipped over the other public hearing. All right, so public hearing, ZC 2018-004. Hold a public hearing, consider and make a recommendation on an amendment of Part 3, Schertz Code of Ordinances, Unified Development Code, to Article 8, Special Uses and General Regulations, subsection 21.8.2, Accessory Buildings, Uses, and Structures, Associated Code of Ordinance Amendment. This was tabled at the August 8th meeting, so we need to begin with a motion to pull this off the table for further discussion and consideration.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we remove this item from the table and continue our discussion.
All right.
Second.
A motion by Commissioner Outlaw, second by Mr. Evans. Call for a vote.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion carries 6 ayes, no nays. Okay.
Hello again, Commissioners. So we're back again to go over some of the language that we met with planning, got together on to try to come up with a good way to approach this. And so we're back tonight to discuss some of that. This was the UDC that you see here on section 21.8.2. Is this the updated? Okay, so this is what it was?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the current UDC. And these are the requirements that are currently under review. So we have the 3 feet from the common property line, no accessory building use or structure closer than 10 feet to the main building, and then the minimum separation between a main structure being 10 feet, like we've been talking about.
And so then just what we've met about and kind of updated, coming back to you with changing an accessory building or structure may not be located less than 10 feet from the main building unless it is located directly behind the main building, in which case the accessory building or structure may be less than 10 foot if it's adjacent to the main building. Took out the minimum separation between the main structure and detached accessory building. Accessory building use and structure shall conform to applicable provisions of the building code and fire code. So this is the one area where we were trying to get a consensus and come together between planning and fire to update or recommend updating the code of ordinances that place this in the building code and the fire code both.
So the one change that you'll notice on this slide from the last time we presented, we had at the end of D, if immediately adjacent or closer than 10 feet must be 1 hour fire rated. So we, in discussions with fire planning and inspections, we didn't feel that incorporating that into the UDC was necessarily the most appropriate place. So that's why that's been removed off of here. So some of the code of ordinance changes that we are now proposing. The last meeting, we were recommending just removing all of this together. This is the exemptions for permitting that was adopted in order to essentially not have to pull that permit for your shed if it was under 120 square feet. After looking at it again, we didn't feel that was the most appropriate way to do it either. We really think just eliminating tool and storage sheds and then storage sheds gets us more of where we need to be. We don't necessarily think that you should have to come in and pull a permit for a playhouse, something like that, but by eliminating tool and storage sheds, that basically means anybody that's coming in with a shed for their residential property will need to come in and pull a permit. The next change is how we felt it was more appropriate to handle the fire rating that was being requested. So it's actually going to be two separate amendments now, one in the building code and one in the fire code, but they do state the same thing for consistency. So it does state an accessory building, for example, sheds and garages, located closer than 10 feet to a dwelling unit must have a minimum 1 hour fire resistance rating on any projection or wall parallel to the dwelling unit. 1 hour fire resistance rating must be in accordance with ASTME 119 or UL 263. So this is how we are proposing to essentially create that requirement for that 1 hour fire rating. We thought it was more appropriate to actually be in the building and fire code itself.
In this picture we've seen a couple times. The area in the blue outline is the 3-foot setbacks from the property line. The areas in yellow is the 10-foot setbacks where nothing's to be in that area. Now the area in red is that 10-foot area behind the structure that will require the fire rating. So with anything in that red area, will require that 1 hour fire rating in the area of the building that's within that section. And then in the back of the property where we see that that hash mark, anything back there is they can put what they want in that area.
That's pretty much kind of our joint effort to bring back, trying to meet the intent of what direction we received from the commission here. And so if there's any questions we could answer further about that, then please let us know.
So we, as planning, we had a conversation prior to tonight's meeting that we feel that it may be beneficial to have a joint P&Z City Council workshop discussion on this. From the opinions of staff, we're getting kind of two conflicting desires, if you will. So we feel like it might be the most beneficial to kind of get everybody in the same room, have a discussion, see the concerns and opinions from both sides to try to get the most productive resolution. Just as a kind of as a side note, as a caveat, we feel like that might be beneficial. But obviously we should have the public hearing and then we can have more discussion as well.
All right, with this being a public hearing, we'll open the public hearing at 6:34. And seeing that we only have staff remaining in the audience, I guess we'll close the public hearing 6:35. All right, commissioners, following up on Emily's comments about our options tonight on this. Our options are basically, we can decline to approve this, we can approve it, or we can look at tabling it again until such time as we can schedule a joint meeting with council to discuss this. And I'm open to any consideration on that.
Well, if I may, Mr. Chairman, we're in the position we're in because this item went to City Council before it came to Planning and Zoning. And as I indicated to one of you earlier, we're going to see another one where the same thing happened, where it's already gone to council and they've made their wishes known, and then you bring it to Planning and Zoning. And the truth is, we don't always look at things the same way as City Council. We're motivated, I think, by different things for different reasons. That being said, again, you're proposing an amendment to the residential code, and I don't see the building department. Okay, I see the fire department. I don't see the building department. I assume you guys ran this through the building official.
Those, go back to it. This is these amendments are kind of the brainchild of these two men and our chief building official. We all got together in a room, and we sat down, and we didn't leave until we got these amendments kind of knocked out. So he was involved.
All right, thank you. And my only concern with your proposed amendment to the fire code, guys, is that I believe it relaxes the current standards on building separations, okay? I don't think a 1 hour fire rated separation is good enough in the building code at 10 feet. So I understand what you're trying to do, and I might be wrong, okay? But what I'm looking at, what I'm looking here is unintended consequences of what we're trying to do. That if we write something generic like this, trying to solve the shed problem, then that's going to override the fire separation requirements of the fire code. That's my concern.
Well, in talking with the building official in this class, in that meeting we had, we were looking at a couple different things in the residential code. And within the residential code, what they actually require, we're making a more stringent code with the hour rating. In building code in the IRC, it actually has a rating for 20 minutes within a 10-foot. So we've actually increased from 20-minute to a 1 hour using the ASTME and the UL listed approved items.
Yeah.
So we looked at that. We looked at what we currently have, and we looked at what we can approve, and that's what the happy medium.
Yes, as it applies to the International Residential Code, you are making it more stringent. Correct. My concern is with the International Fire Code and International Building Code.
Well, under current fire code, the section that you see, the section under section 611.1 is not currently in our code. This will be an amendment to what we currently have under fire code itself.
So if today, without this amendment, I as a business owner came to you and said, I want to take this 10 by 12 storage shed and set it next to my building, what would your answer be? And where I'm going with this is my recollection of the building code, and I'm not sure if it's even in the fire code, but when you start talking about, you can put buildings back to back. You can put them right next to each other if they meet certain fire rated requirements and percentage of openings. And then as you start to move those buildings apart, those requirements get easier and easier. And what I'm saying is, I'm not sure that at 10 feet you can get away with a 1 hour fire rating. I think it's more stringent than that.
After we came back with this, I got with my inspector and we looked up under the table in the fire code, and it shows within that setback it is still 1 hour.
So I can put another building 10 feet from another one and only require 1 hour.
Depending on the occupancy type.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Okay, and then under the R302 section of it, it is point out as a dwelling unit. And it specifies actual residential structures, not commercial.
My only comment is that these two standards that we're talking about, 119 and 263, don't measure the same way. And they don't necessarily apply to the same things. I could come to you and say, I'm going to use hardy plank, 4x8 sheets, and in accordance with the UL, I could meet that standard. I don't think it would meet it in accordance with 119. I don't know that for a fact because I have not looked it up. But in the UL standard, I would have met it because I used hardy plank in a construction for the city of San Antonio, and the fire department approved it. And it was a UL label that I was tearing off the hardy plank and pasting on their piece of paper and giving to them.
I will say that we did discuss that, and this was where we met with the building official, and you know, at the end of the day, we had to come up with a way that we could both put in update both our fire code and our building codes to meet that. So we took that language directly out of the building code, and we did actually talk about hardy plank specifically, that we would accept that based on the UL.
Okay. Thank you, guys. It's just
Do we specifically state that a permit, or by doing this, are we reinstating the permit requirement for a shed, all sheds?
Yes, so by eliminating the tool and storage shed out of this exception, reinstates the permitting of all sheds.
And then how do I, as an applicant for a permit, or when I go pull a permit, and I've never pulled a permit for anything, so I don't know. When I look at under the UDC item D, how does it link me back to the fire code requirements?
So it's actually the subsection N, where accessory buildings, uses, and structures shall conform to applicable provisions of the building code and fire code. So essentially, if you brought in a shed permit and we reviewed it and said you're proposing this shed directly adjacent to the rear of your home, we would say, well, it has to be in compliance with the building and fire code to have it in this location. It has to be 1 hour fire rated.
And then where do I go to comply with that? Do I have to look it up myself, or how do I go? How do I take that?
At that point in time, you get to sit down with Gil, and if you haven't ever done that, I'd encourage you to do it. It's a really fun, enlightening experience as he walks you through what it is. Again, building codes, fire codes, all of those kinds of codes are not overly homeowner friendly. Mm-hmm. This is a common thing that people get into. Part of our job is to help homeowners understand things and educate them and get them through this process. They may find that, yep, this is more research and more reading than I'm willing to do, and I'll just pay somebody else to do it. Or they may say, I got free time and I'm interested. Let's do it. And we'll work with them through that if that's so their desire. The same way that the person who says, well, I've built a deck before, I can build my own deck. Well, sure you can. So come in, but you got to have plans, deck plans that meet building code. And they're going to say, well, what does that mean? Where's the easy cheat sheet? The answer is we don't have one, but we'll sit down and we'll walk you through it, and we'll let you know exactly what we need and how to draw it up. It needs to be to scale, and, you know, here's how to get that done.
Yeah, now, just as some information, you know, as the fire marshal, I would review a set of plans. And I would look at fire and building code requirements, and I would look and I would say, okay, this wall between occupancy A and occupancy B has to be 1 hour. Now, that's all I'd say. I wouldn't tell the architect how to build that wall. My requirement was that it be 1 hour fire rated in accordance with, and last time I looked, you all had a book or two with about 5,000 different ways. Well, it was all the different fire ratings, but there were probably a couple hundred different ways to build a 1 hour rated firewall or fire rated partition. And then within the building code, a couple of revisions ago, they started putting their own assemblies in there, and so you could go to the building code and you could pick out an assembly that it would say, 2x4 galvanized steel studs on 22-inch centers requires, half-inch sheetrock with batting insulation. And it would tell you this is one way to do it, or you could do it this way, or you could do it that way. So what Bryce is saying is exactly right. It's not a user-friendly environment. Okay.
To that extent as well, one of the items that we are aware of and that we do need to do and that we have been trying to work on, and I think we've gotten better over the last couple of years, is outreach to the public to help answer these questions. So, one of the things that we will most likely do, depending on whatever change, if any, occurs as this goes all the way through and up the chain, is creating that guide to say, I'm a homeowner, how do I do this? What are all the requirements? Well, we'll kind of dumb them down for you. We're still going to throw our caveat in there of there's other ways to do it, but here's one. And that may include a couple listed assemblies that are common. Hardy plank, the 2x4 studs, and then the X-rated, fire-rated sheetrock. I think there's probably some paint or some other items that are in there. But there's common ones that we know, if you're a homeowner and you're going to put this together, this is probably a good way to start looking. If you know how to do, drywall, know how to do this stuff, here you go. Just to help so that, they don't have to go through that huge booklet of things to find out, I'm not going to buy this specialized, super expensive assembly when there's something that accomplishes the job, that's a listed rated assembly that I can do myself, if you will.
I just was going to mention too, something else we had talked about depending on how this turns out, is also reaching out, just to piggyback off of the public outreach that we were talking about, is contacting the storage building manufacturers that we know we have in our area that we see buildings from, and also providing them that update to what we've done, and so that they can educate citizens from our area that come in as well. So that's something else we've talked about planning to do.
So if I remember correctly, in the past permits were required, but that didn't stop somebody from going in on a Saturday, purchasing a shed, having it delivered, and there was no policing. So even if we're educating Lowe's, there's no repercussions if they sell somebody a shed on a Saturday and that person takes it, drops it off at their house on a Saturday. So where does that put us if we're going to require permits and there's ways around it?
There's always ways around it. There are people who, I don't like regulation, I don't care what you say, I'm going to do it my way regardless. That attitude exists, unfortunately. The majority of people want to follow the rules, they want to do things in a safe manner. We will always have people who don't pull a permit for their shed. One of the things that we can do to combat that is to get the information out there, because there's a difference between the person who, I installed the shed and I didn't know I needed a permit, and the person who knows, well, I needed a permit, but I didn't want to deal with that hassle or whatever they're going to say, so I didn't do it. That person, shame on them. You kind of got what's coming to you. You create an unsafe situation. Code enforcement's going to knock at your door. They're going to say, remove it. If you don't remove it, you're going to get issued a citation. You can take it up in municipal court, and they'll keep going through the cycle till we get compliance. That's the way it works. Now, to the extent of the person who didn't know I needed a permit. Well, the answer is we can do all that we can to start putting this information together in a very easy to digest one location spot. So for example, right now we have a spot about garage sales and sheds on our residence page on the Schertz.com page that explains in very lay terms what you have to do to get a shed. So it says you don't have to do a permit right now if it's under 120 square feet, but you do have to comply with the requirements, and the requirements are generally as follows. Has to be 3 feet off the property line, 10 feet from the building. If it has a permanent foundation, that has to have a permit. If it doesn't have a permanent foundation, you're allowed to do it. Can't be placed in easements, can't be placed in the front yard. We've identified those things from the various spots in our code that they are, compiled them into a single document for the consumer, for the resident. But absolutely, we will forever, as long as we have permits, have people who do not pull permits and do work anyways.
I'm just thinking if I had just moved to Schertz and felt like I needed an 8x8 storage shed in my backyard, I don't think that it would ever cross my mind to go to the website and check to see whether or not I could have that shed in my backyard. I would go buy it and put it in my backyard. I could understand if I were building an addition to my house, yeah, I need a permit. I need to go talk to somebody about this. But I just don't myself see somebody going, well, I need to research whether or not I can have a very small metal building in the back of my yard.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, we can inform the suppliers of our requirements. They'll do the best that they can. I think I've seen multiple times, as I'm quite a handyman myself, do a lot of my own work on my home, pull a lot of my own permits. People are, I'll be going down Home Depot aisles or Lowe's aisles, and I'm talking shop with them, and they're like, well, what are you using it for? Oh, I'm using it for my home. Well, make sure you pull a permit. They'll give you references on things as you go about the local city that you're in. So, to that benefit, yeah, the folks who are selling the sheds at Lowe's, they know that we have a permit, or they should know. And if they don't, again, part of this handout that the chief was talking about is educate the sellers so that they educate the public. Now, the public, they're not going to sell to the public. Well, they're going to most likely sell to the public regardless. Because at the end of the day, it's not their responsibility to make sure that a permit was pulled. It's the homeowners. As far as the service that I believe that Lowe's sells, which is here you go and we have a third party deliver, or maybe it's through a third party, I can't remember on that. But they're not the homeowner. They're not the person that is violating that permit. Now, if they're installing the shed without a permit, then they are, because they're a contractor doing work in the city without a permit. That's a different issue, and we can crack down on that. But if it's nope, you sell it to me and I assemble it at home and it's that metal one, and I just pull my truck up and you load it up, and I'm going to call a couple of my friends, we're going to have some beers and pizza as I put this together, yeah, it's very possible that they don't know. But the best that we can do is get that message out, inform the public, make it easy and accessible. So one of the items that we've even done on the permits page, if you ever go look at that on our Schertz website, at the very beginning is kind of the most common question information. What codes are we using? How do I pull a permit? How long does it take to pull a permit? And as you scroll through it, and as you go a little bit further down, it really goes into a lot of detail. Here's everything, every action that you do in the city that requires a permit. Here are the things that you may not know that don't require a permit. We even list that out. These kinds of things don't require a permit, just so that the interested public can know, and you can search it, and it'll pop up on our website via search as well.
Okay, and if I'm understanding correctly, what I heard was that P&Z and the city council aren't necessarily in agreement with what has been proposed? Is that...
So the direction that city council gave staff, more or less, is in conflict with what the current proposal is. And this proposal is a workup of a combination of multiple conversations with the Planning and Zoning Commission. So our assumption is that this is generally where y'all were looking to go with a change if being made. Understand that a few of you have voiced opinions about not wanting any change at all. And others have said we'll defer to the fire department and kind of what they're good with.
So even if we approve this and pass this up, city council, if there's some conflict here, city council is going to say, well, we don't care what planning and zoning says, we're going to do what we want to do. Is that correct?
They can absolutely do that.
They are the elected officials. They have the ultimate authority, yes.
Okay, so is it, I mean, I don't want to drag this out any more than necessary, but is it maybe a good idea to sit down and have a joint panel with them?
And that is one of the things that staff has suggested, and so that's
Right, and
what.
so that's what is that maybe the direction?
Yeah, and that's what we need to, I think we're kind of at a consensus on what we have here as a product, that we think this is the way it ought to be. Council feels differently. And so now, we as a body need to decide, do we want to make a recommendation to approve these amendments and send that to council? Do we want to table it and ask council to consider a joint session to discuss this and then make a final decision? Or do we just want to say, no, we're not good with this, we'll just let council do what they want to do?
Mr. Chairman, a procedural question. Hypothetically, we accept what's before us today, and we forward that to City Council. Now, if they don't like it, what happens? Do they rewrite it? What happens?
Yep. So they can rewrite it. They can direct staff to rewrite it. They can fix it on the floor, I believe, as well. Or they can send it back to P&Z.
Okay.
Or they can deny it. I mean, they can approve, deny, modify, or remand back to Planning and Zoning Commission or back to staff.
But it won't come back to us to
unless they tell us to bring it back, which has happened.
So, Commissioner Bacon, what I said earlier, and I have to agree with staff. It's my feeling, having been at that meeting where they discussed this, that this is not necessarily what they were looking for. But that said, I also think we've heard other arguments and had evidence isn't the right word, but we've had presentations and we've had access to information that council did not have access to at that meeting. And the one advantage I see to a joint meeting is we would have a chance to explain to council why we came up with this, why we, rather than just send them this and let them sit up there and go, we would have an opportunity to explain ourselves. So for that reason, I think if nothing else, just having the chance to explain our rationale and why we're bringing what we're bringing to them, knowing that it's, I won't say they're necessarily 100% against what we've got, but it's a little more than I think they were looking for. So I think for that reason, having a joint meeting with them would be a good idea.
I would agree with that. As staff and I have discussed, there's a couple other issues that we probably need to discuss with council as well. And we've been several years now without a joint meeting between P&Z and council, so it's probably high time that we look at doing that. So with that, I think we're kind of leaning toward a consensus, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we look to table this and to ask council to look at scheduling a joint meeting. Yes, heads nod.
Is a question. Do we need to take action on this before that meeting, or just assume that we have a consensus?
No, so you can, as Chairman Dalla stated earlier, you can approve it. You can offer a recommendation of approval, recommendation of denial, or table. And if you table, I would just table it. You don't need to specify a date or time or anything else. That way, as we get this meeting scheduled, we can then have a conversation also as we get a little closer with Mr. Dahl on if you want the item as an action item on the joint meeting as well. I think the probably preference of the commission would be to wait till the following meeting after that joint meeting to take action on it, but shouldn't affect this very much, and the extra timing that we add on to it shouldn't affect anyone, as the residents who are still in violation up in Northcliffe will remain in that sense, and we'll give them a stay until we get full resolution and City Council makes a decision however direction they want to on this.
I guess I'm asking about mechanics and procedure here. So we have a proposed document from staff. I agree with it. It's a good document. So do we as a commission need to take some sort of action that says we accept city staff's proposal and request a joint meeting with City Council to discuss approval of this document?
You do not, because at this time, ultimately, it'll be up to City Council if they choose to have the joint meeting or not. We have talked with Mr. James on this, and he is in favor of talking to City Council about having this joint meeting, and we feel pretty confident that they'll agree to it. Ultimately, they kind of control their own agenda as well. So if the commission is looking to just table this item and delay any recommendation action so that you can have an opportunity to talk with City Council and talk through this, give them your rationale for why you feel the way you do, what you think the way, and what you think, then my recommendation is that you just table the item. Staff will then, we've heard the commentary, we'll get a meeting scheduled, a joint meeting scheduled, and then we'll place it on the agenda item following that joint meeting, whichever meeting that is. Then you would take a recommendation action, either approving or offering a recommendation in favor or denial. And we'll kind of get a consensus.
At the joint meeting?
We will do it following the joint meeting at a separate meeting because I think that's most appropriate. That gives opportunity for staff to make any adjustments that may come out of a consensus between the group. And then you're not forced to make weird motions or have us create language on the fly.
All right, I think we have a consensus on that and how to move forward. So if that's the will of the rest of the commissioners here, I guess we'll need to have a motion to table this until we can schedule a meeting with City Council.
So if I understand what Bryce is saying, if we were to table this tonight, and then possibly have a joint discussion with City Council, but no action.
Correct.
The action would come at a follow-on P&Z. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, and I think the comfort level that staff has on this is, and I would think that the commission as well, is to say, let's have this conversation. Let's see what comes out of it. We may be where we are today, and if that's the case, that's okay. We'll bring it back at the following meeting. Or if there's opinions that are changed or another compromise that's struck or something else that causes the language to change, it's a little easier for staff if we're able to review it and make sure we don't get conflict instead of having it as an action item for P&Z following the kind of probably a public hearing workshop.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we table item ZC 2018-004 till a future date, unspecified.
Right, motion to table by Commissioner Outlaw. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Breaux. Any other comments or questions? All right, call for a vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 6 ayes, no nays. All right. Now to the items for individual consideration. Consider and act upon a request for approval of preliminary plat for the Fire Station Number 3 subdivision and approximately 5.02 acre tract of land located approximately 900 feet west of the intersection of FM 1518 and Lower Seguin Road, City of Schertz, Bexar County. Emily.
Okay, commissioners, to get your bearings, this is FM 1518 here and Lower Seguin Road, and then this green square is the proposed Fire Station Number 3 preliminary plat. It is being requested to be platted in order to develop Fire Station Number 3 at this property. So this is the plat document itself. I'm going to zoom in on the actual property so it's a little easier to see. So the property is 4.91 acres with an additional 0.11 acres being dedicated as right-of-way along Lower Seguin. The entire property does have frontage on Lower Seguin Road. There is a tree affidavit which indicates that the site does contain protected and heritage trees, but with the plat, none will be damaged or removed. In accordance with UDC Section 21.4.15C2, applicants have the right to defer and enter into essentially an agreement to defer the roadway and sewer till the time of construction. The city is requesting to do that deferral essentially with ourselves. for roadway and sanitary sewer until it's more appropriate. So with that, Lot 1 will be serviced through an existing 8-inch City of Schertz water line adjacent to Lower Seguin Road, which you can see here. And then Lot 1 will temporarily be serviced by a private force main to an existing sanitary sewer manhole located at the intersection of Hollering Vine and Lower Seguin Road. In accordance with the master plan of the Crossvine development, which is directly across Lower Seguin Road, there is a plan for a public gravity sanitary sewer extension that will serve this lot. So essentially, the city's deferral would be to wait until that extension is completed, and then the private force main would be taken offline, and the sanitary sewer would be routed to the more appropriate extension. The city engineer has reviewed the drainage report associated with this preliminary plat and approved it. So as I had mentioned earlier, the subject property is off of Lower Seguin Road, which is identified on the master thoroughfare plan as a secondary arterial with a right-of-way width of 90 feet. The 0.11 acre dedication along the frontage does provide the necessary street right-of-way width to get the 90 feet as described by the master thoroughfare plan. However, the expansion of the roadway to half of its ultimate section for this property would be deferred until the adjacent properties are developed in order to create a more functioning, all-encompassing road, if you will, rather than just extending this portion of the roadway at this time. And I do have a note that this segment of Lower Seguin Road is identified on the City of Schertz Roadway Capital Improvements Plan, which means it would be eligible for funding in the roadway impact fee program. The proposed preliminary plat is consistent with the applicable requirements for platting, and staff is making a recommendation of approval, and we do have the fire chief still here if there's any questions.
All right, commissioners.
I don't remember, the city's not going to pay roadway impact fees to itself, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Please, if you'd back up a second, where you talked about developing half of the roadway, that
we are still obligated to do all of the necessary public infrastructure improvements that any other development would be required to do, which is, for this, doing half of the roadway to the full extent. So it would be creating the pavement width, as specified by the master thoroughfare plan, up to the full expansion for our half of Lower Seguin Road adjacent to the property.
and I had the term rough proportionality. Why wouldn't we just, I mean, that's what everybody else is doing these days. Why don't we?
So
I'm sorry, because I'm hearing that the city might be subjected to requirements that the developers got out of ages ago. Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm not sure if rough proportionality applies to the city as well. I guess in theory and concept it may. The intent of my understanding from the engineering department, who's been kind of managing some of the public infrastructure on this portion, is the intent is for us to do our portion of the road. It's not a full rebuild of the section. It's an addition of pavement for width. The deferral in part on the roadway is because it is pretty close to the intersection, and there's intersection improvements that will be coming in with both the 15-18 improvements as well as Crossvine gearing up for their commercial section, which is coming up. And so the request would be, instead of building this section kind of in an off portion, is to wait for it to start at the corner, and we'll tack on to that project and build our portion from property line to property line at that point.
Okay. Well, I mean, that makes sense. But to clarify, so we wouldn't necessarily have to redo the whole road, just add enough pavement to make it.
meet the required width.
But as you say, it really doesn't make any sense just at this time to do just that little piece of road. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, also, we're going to pay for it, because if we do rough proportionality, we're picking up the difference anyways.
Gotcha.
So.
Thank you.
My only comment is that I wish we'd been at this point 5 years ago.
same way.
All right, Commissioners, any other comments or questions? All right, do I have a motion?
Move that we approve case PC 2018-33, Fire Station Number 3 subdivision, preliminary plat.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Broad. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second by Commissioner Bacon. All right, any other comments or questions? All right, call for a vote.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries, 6 ayes, no nays. All right, requests and announcements. Request by commissioners to place items on a future planning and zoning agenda. Commissioners, do we have anything? All right, announcements by commissioners. All right, announcements by staff.
So one announcement that staff has, the city has been conducting community budget meetings. There was one last Thursday, there's one this evening, and there is one, the last one will be tomorrow, Thursday, the 23rd at 6:30 p.m., and it's going to be held at the Schertz United Methodist Church. This is an opportunity for the public to give input on the proposed budget. I believe it's typically pretty well attended by a number of elected and appointed officials, as well as representatives from most departments. So encourage anybody who hasn't gone to one or hasn't seen the budget yet to attend or read about the budget or go to the, I believe the first hearing is next Tuesday on the proposed budget on City Council. Oh, also, Commissioners, you have received a copy of the bylaws draft from Mr. James. We will be placing this item as an item on the agenda for next meeting. So if there are any comments or corrections that you would like to get into us beforehand, we're happy to take a look at that as well. Feel free to email them to myself and Mr. James.
All right, does anybody have anything else? All right, meeting adjourned, 7:12.